Give me a moment to get my talit on here.
I'm excited. We have a new participant in the on the screen.
Just turn off my camera for a second. Okay, trying something new tonight.
Cool. I like that.
See if this works. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's good to see you. We are here for our Shabbat service tonight, and also it's our Shabbat just before Pesach. Traditionally, this is known as Shabbat Hagadol. The Shabbat before Pesach is the one where the rabbi gives the longest sermon of the year.
Yay.
I'm not going to do that tonight.
Yay.
But it is an opportunity traditionally for the rabbi. I'm in the wrong glasses. For the rabbi to explain all of the intricate laws and rules of Pesach. I'm not going to do that tonight either. But we will start with some music, and I will share some thoughts with you. Although actually they're not about Pesach tonight. Cantor Tasik, it's good to see you. We've given Rabbi Brown the evening off. Nice. She'll do services tomorrow. I'm going to take that Shabbat off as well, or that service off at least, to get ready for Seder in the evening. So let's begin.
Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov shevet achim gam yachad. Love it. Oh, you're muted, but
it's a whole new thing. We're trying this Sidur online, and I only finished it seconds before the service. This could get a little weird. But let's continue. Yedid Nefesh.
Wonderful. Yedid nefesh av harachaman, Yedid nefesh av harachaman, Meshach avdecha el ratzonecha, Meshach avdecha yadadadai el ratzonecha. Yarut avdecha kemaya yishtachav elayrai la el muadarecha. Yarut avdecha kemaya yishtachav elayrai la el muadarecha.
And we'll continue Shir L'Adonai, Shir Chadash, Psalm 96.
Shir L'Adonai, Shir Chadash, Shir L'Adonai, Kol Haaretz, Shir L'Adonai, Baruch Shemo, Basru miyom liyom Yeshuato, Sapru v'goyim kevodo, B'chol ha'amim nifleotav, Ki gadol Adonai, Humhulam heyod, Norahu, Al kol Elohim maya. Yada 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 Yai-dai, yai-dai, yada-dai. Yai-dai, dai-dai. Yai-dai, dai-dai.
So as we come to greet the Sabbath, we continue with Lecha Dodi. Do I have that out of order? I think I do.
Usually we do Shabbat Shalom Aleichem
And we'll get
first.
there. Hang on, I got that set up too. There we are.
There we go.
We'll go back to that one.
Okay.
I'll switch those around later. We'll greet Shabbos as we welcome the Shabbos angels, those extra souls that come and visit us on Shabbat. And I'm going to talk about this later in my sermon, but this idea of nobody to be alone on Shabbat. I was out visiting with many of our congregants over this past week, delivering the Passover kits and boxes. And I can tell you that there are angels out there in the world, that it's not just rabbis and cantors and volunteers that visit from the synagogue, but that so many have angels that show up in their life to help them with errands, to help check in on them, to bring down their recycling, to bring up their mail, their groceries. And those are shlichim as well. Those are messengers from the divine. The people that show up in our life is how God shows up in our life. And so we welcome all that come to be with us for Shabbat, that help to fill our lives, especially in this time of so much loneliness and isolation, which existed before the pandemic and has even increased, of course, since then. Shalom Aleichem. We continue.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei HaMalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bachem L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei HaMlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Barchuni L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei HaMalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei HaMalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
So now we'll go back, and forgive me for skipping through, but now we'll go back to Lecha Dodi as we welcome the Shabbos as it were a Shabbos bride.
Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabla shamor v'zachor b'dibor echad Hishmianu el hamiuchad Adonai echad ushmo echad l'shemol tiferet Letehila lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabla likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha ki mekor haberacha merosh mikedem nesucha sof maaseh b'machshava techila lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabla mikdash melech ir melucha kumitzehi mitoch hafecha rav lach shevet b'yamecha b'chavahu yachamol halayechem la lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabla hitoreri kiva orech umiori Uri, Uri, Shir Daberi, Kavod Adonai, Alayach Nigla, Lecha Dodi, Likrat Kala, Penei, Shabbat, Nekabela, Boi v'shalom, Materet Bala, Gam b'simcha, Uvtala, Toch Emune, Am Segula, Boi chala, Lecha Dodi, Likrat Kala, Penei, Shabbat, Nekabela.
And so we'll rise now for Chatzi Kaddish as we continue and make a separation between the Kabbalat Shabbat portion of our service, the warm-ups, the getting in the mood for Shabbos, and now moving into Shema and its blessings, the central portion or one of the two central portions of our Kabbalat Shabbat service, of our Erev Shabbat service. We rise Chatzi Kaddish.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah v'amad yivrachute v'yamlich malchute v'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayed achol Beit Yisrael bagala uv'izman kariv v'imeru amen. Yesh me Rabba mevarach le'alam olam me'almaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitalel shemei kudesha barichu le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechemata Tamiram ve'alma ve'imeru Amen.
And so we continue now with the Shema and its blessings will rise for the Baruch Hu.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed.
As evening sets and as we begin to appreciate these longer days that seem to go on, and it's so wonderful given the memory of those short and, it's still cold, but short and wet days of earlier in the year, we thank God for setting the stars in the heavens and bringing upon the evening. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, v'chochma poteach she'arim, u'bitvuna meshana itim, u'machalif et hazmanim, u'mesader et ha'kochavim v'mishmerotehem, v'rakia kirtzono. Borei yom v'layla, golel or mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or. U'ma'avir yom u'mevi layla, u'mavdil bein yom u'bein layla, Adonai tzavaot shemo. El chai v'kayam, Tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'ma'ariv aravim.
Amen. Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael amcha ahavta Torah mitzvot chukim u'mishpatim otanu limadeta Al kein Adonai Eloheinu b'shachbeinu uvkumeinu Nasiach bechokacha, v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, u'v'mitzvotecha, le'olam va'ed. Ki hem chayenu ve'yorech yameinu, u'vehem nege yomam v'layla. Ve'ahavatecha al tasir mimenu le'olamim. Baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael. Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha. Ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom alevavecha. Veshinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam. Beshivtecha beveitecha v'lechtecha v'derech u'v'shochbecha u'v'kumecha u'kshartam lehod al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha u'chtavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'v'hisharecha Leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'yitem kedoshim lelohechem Ani Adonai Elohechem Asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'Elohim Ani Adonai Elohechem Emet.
Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe that what we were taught before we ever stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. Once again, we are reminded that the Passover narrative, the Exodus story that we will talk about tomorrow night and Sunday night in our second Seder, that weaves its way throughout our liturgy and throughout the story of the Jewish people. To express that it is eternally Egypt is to remember what we are told at our Seder, to see ourselves as having ourselves come out of slavery in Egypt, to see the suffering of others as though we ourselves had been slaves to Pharaoh, and to recognize with empathy the suffering that others experience, and then to act as was done for us as we should do for others. This central narrative, this important thread, it comes up again and again. Every time you hear the word Mitzrayim, we're talking about Egypt. We're talking about the experience there and how it should be an imprint upon our soul and an impetus for the work that we do, not just in shul, but out in the world as well. We'll continue Micha Mocha, the song of redemption.
Mi chamocha belim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osef ele, nora tehilot osef ele, machotecha rahu vanecha, bokei hayam lifnei Moshe Miriam Zeilianu ve'amru Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed V'nemar kifad Adonai Yaakov Ogelo miyad chazak mimenu Baruch atah Adonai Ga'al Yisrael.
We thank God for watching over us with a Sukkot Shlomecha, a shelter of peace. We continue with Hashkivenu.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom, v'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Amen. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom. V'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Amen.
I added some extra stuff here that I didn't realize I put in there.
Another week, another time.
I was doing this very quickly. I only kind of figured it out and got the file a couple hours ago.
It's great.
So we'll continue with V'shamru as we acknowledge the sanctity of Shabbat. V'shamru.
V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, לדורותם ברית עולם, ביני ובין בני ישראל, ביני ובין בני ישראל, ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. Yum bada bim bum bye, Shabbat, Shabbat, yum bada bim bum bye, Shabbat, Shabbat, yum bada bim bum bye, Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz uvayom hashvi Shabbat vayinafash. Yum bada bim bum bye, Shabbat, Shabbat, yum bada bim bum bye, Shabbat, Shabbat, yum bada bim bum bye, Shabbat, 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 Shalom.
Really have to pay attention if you're flipping slides and trying to daven at the same time. I don't know. We'll see. I love this reading, and one of the things that we don't often see in our Siddur, because this is in the earlier service, not the earlier service, but Shabbat service 1 instead of 2, we normally use 2, is this beautiful introduction to V'shamru, or summary of V'shamru, rendering of V'shamru, and an introduction to the Amidah. A thought has blown the marketplace away. There is a song on the wind and joy in the trees. The Sabbath arrives in the world, scattering a song in the silence of the night. Eternity utters a day. We'll continue with the Amidah and we'll rise. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up our lips that our mouths might find the words to speak with you in prayer.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu v'imoteinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel chasadim tovim v'konei hakol, v'zocher chasdei avot v'imahot, u'mevi geola livnei v'neihem, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר מושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח מוריד הגשם. מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני העפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומדם מלוך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בך יום יעלנו חסלה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
Amen. You are holy, your name is holy, and those who are holy praise you every day. Blessed you Adonai, the holy God. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh.
Amen.
You can be seated if you stood. That's actually as far as I got on the slides before the service started. So I'm going to turn those off and we'll return to our prayer book at this time, as Cantor Tassic will pick us up where we left off.
Page 277 in the middle. Eloheinu v'Eloi Avotenu v'Imotenu, Ritzevi Menuchateinu, Kadshenu b'mitzvotecha, V'tein chelkeinu b'toratecha, Sabeinu mitovecha, V'samcheinu b'shuvatecha, V'taher libenu, V'taher libenu, V'taher libenu, Le'ovdecha b'emet, V'taher libenu, V'taher libenu, V'taher libenu, Le'ovdecha be'emet. Anchilenu Adonai Eloheinu, Ve'havav ratzon Shabbat kodechecha, Ve'anuchu v'Yisrael, Mekadesh Shmecha, Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat.
May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. May we all live in such a way that this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen. Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu, Be'amcha Yisrael, U'tefilatam be'ahava tekabel, U'tehi ratzon Tamid avodat Yisrael. Yisrael Amecha. El karov lechol, korav penei, el avadecha v'chonenu, shepach ruchacha, aleinu, v'techazen einenu, B'shuvecha leTzion, Berachamim. Baruch atah Adonai, HaMachazir Shechinato leTzion, leTzion.
We offer a prayer of hoda'ah, of thanksgiving for the blessings in our life. Modim anachnu lach, shetahu Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei avotenu v'imotenu le'olam va'ed, sur chainu magen yeshuenu atahu ledor vador. For the good in us which calls us to a better life, we give thanks. For the strength to improve the world with our hearts and our hands, we offer praise. For the desire in us which leads us to work for peace, we are grateful. For life and nature, harmony and beauty, for the hope of tomorrow, all praise to the source of being.
Ve'al kula v'yitromam, Yitbarach v'yitromam, Shimcha Malkeinu, Tamid le'olam va'ed, Ve'al kulam, Yitbarach v'yitromam, Yitbarach v'yitromam, Shimcha Malkeinu, Tamid le'olam va'ed. V'cholchem yoducha selah, v'hallelu et shimcha be'emet, ha'el Yeshuateinu v'ezrateinu selah, Baruch atah Adonai, Hatov Shimcha, Ulecha na'eh lehodot.
A song of peace, a prayer for peace, page 282, a great peace. Shalom Rav.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki ata melech Adon lecho hashalom. Ki ata melech Adon lecho hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim leolam. V'tov b'necha levarech et amcha Yisrael b'chol leit v'chol shah b'shlomecha. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim leolam. Baruch atah Adonai, Hamavarech et Amo Yisrael, B'Shalom.
Amen. We'll take a moment for our own private prayers and meditations.
Imrefi, Vegion libi lefanecha. Adonai tzuri, Adonai tzuri, vegoali, vegoali.
We turn to page 371 in our prayer book to offer a Misha Berach, a prayer for healing, for those in our community, within our circle of friends who are sick and in need of community, in need of prayer for healing. And as soon as my computer responds, I can read the name. Oh, it's been an evening. At this Shabbat, we ask a Misha Berach, a prayer for healing for Jerry Groh, Haya Sahaba Bat Yehuda Leah, Gordon Cherry, Alana James, Dr. Arthur Ross, Yana Timko, Dr. Dimitri Zanozin, Lynn Zabo, Shana Stawicki, Maylor Valance, Elliot Pohl, Sanford Cohen, Jean Angus, Sarah Chiachi, Kim Bennett, Sarah Bat Avraham Basara, Igor Ilisov, Ed Ozer, David Shlomo Gorney, Ronnie Goldberg, Andrea Jarzabak, and Neil Tapley. If there are others in need of this prayer for healing, I invite you please to call their names out loud, to type them even into the comment window below this video screen as we join with our cantor in this prayer for healing, page 371 of Misha Berach.
Misha Berach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misha Berach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Lehavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Thank you, Cantor Tausig. Just a couple of quick announcements this evening. First, I want to share with you all. Let me just see that works. Okay. That the temple office staff is going to be taking the week of Pesach as a sort of a sabbatical week to recharge and refresh. Our team has been going flat out really since the Pesach of last year, the beginning of the pandemic. And we thought that this, with the couple of statutory holidays that are bookending the Pesach week, more or less, that we would allow everybody to take some time to step away from their computers and their emails and the phone calls and to recharge as we prepare for the next sort of phase of our year. Rabbi Brown and I, of course, will still be available for emergencies. If you'll receive an email from the office, I'm sure, with our phone numbers. If you email the office, you'll get an out of office with our phone numbers. If you call the office, you'll get our phone numbers. So call us if it's an emergency. Don't hesitate at all. But don't expect regular correspondence and those kinds of things from the synagogue during the coming week of Pesach. That said, Pesach is upon us, and we do have a few things going on. Tomorrow, of course, there's a Saturday morning service, and I hope that you'll join us for that at 10 a.m. I believe there's Torah study before that at 8:30. Following the service, of course, there'll be a virtual oneg. Tomorrow night is the first night of Seder. And then Sunday morning at 10 a.m. will be our first day of Pesach holiday service. So join us for that right here at the same channels and places online. And then Sunday night, join us online for our second night Seder. You can still sign up. We had such a wonderful experience last year. It's kind of hard to remember last year. It's kind of a blur, but it was very meaningful at the beginning of the pandemic. I hope this is the last one of these that we need to do, at least for the purpose of a pandemic. So join us online. The Haggadah that we brought home in our Passover kits is the one we'll be using online, but we'll also put it up on screen, and hopefully you can join us for that. And then next Saturday is our Yizkor service. In the Reform movement, we celebrate 7 days of Pesach, just like they do in Israel. There's reasons for that, and we'll explain them if you have questions about it. But Saturday is going to be our Yizkor service a week from tomorrow. So join us for our regular Shabbat morning service at 10 a.m. with an additional section for Yizkor, as we'll be reading the names of those who we remember this entire year who died during this past year, and of course any names for Kaddish as well. I think those are the basic announcements. There's obviously stuff coming up after Pesach, but let's focus on Pesach for the moment. And that being said, I wanted to share a few pre-Pesach thoughts with you. As I said at the beginning, normally Shabbat Hagadol would be the rabbi's longest sermon of the year. I promise not to do that tonight. But I did want to share a couple of thoughts that I had this week, because it was really quite a very powerful week of connection with the congregation. Many years ago, former First Lady of the United States, Hillary Clinton, she was that among many other things, made famous an old African proverb: "It takes a village to raise a child." The phrase has long since become part of popular culture, and many of us, myself included, will often use the shorthand version, "it takes a village," whenever we encounter an obstacle that could not have been overcome without the help of others. I thought about that phrase again and again this past week as I drove around Vancouver and Richmond and the North Shore, delivering Passover kits to more than a dozen households in our congregation. Many of these deliveries were to our elders and those that have been homebound, not merely because of the pandemic, but also because of health and mobility issues that preceded the pandemic and maybe have been exacerbated by the pandemic. I had not seen any of these people, any of them in person in almost a year. In a few cases, I hadn't seen them in person in more than a year. And it was so good to visit with them for a few minutes, socially distanced on their front porch or in the doorway of their home. But it was also really hard. It was really hard to hear face to face how lonely and isolated so many have felt, the experience they've had during this pandemic. The stories were so often familiar to each other. Adult children and grandchildren unable to come into their homes because of worries about COVID transmission, or because they live out of province or out of country and can't visit like they used to. I also heard how much they missed synagogue and the socialization and connection that attending services, or even committee meetings for that matter, always gave them. There's an old joke, made older because I think I've told it to you more than once, about Schwartz and Goldberg going to shul. The rabbi is surprised to see Goldberg attending Shabbat services every week. Schwartz, he thinks he understands why. Schwartz's father was a cantor, he grew up in a religious home, but Goldberg, the man, never used to come to shul except maybe on the high holy days, and then he would sit in the back and would leave early. The rabbi asked them one day why all of a sudden they were coming together and so regularly to Shabbos services. Goldberg, the previously twice-a-year Jew, explained, "Well, Rabbi, Schwartz likes to come to talk to God. I like to come to talk to Schwartz." There is so much more to synagogue, of course, than prayer. Our services have long been just the medium, the excuse really, for people to see their friends, to get a little nosh, to fill their day with something other than TV, cooking, and housekeeping. And so I hear that as I stand on the porch. I hear how people miss the people of synagogue. Prayer they can get online like we're doing right now, but people, human beings, face to face, panim al panim, that is irreplaceable. But then I heard something else that fills me up and enabled me to ultimately leave that Passover box on their door with at least a little bit of degree of diminished worry. Every single one of the people that I visited, those that were alone and isolated, none were truly alone. They all had a neighbor, a friend, a member of the temple that would check in on them, bring up their mail, offer to pick up groceries, take down their recycling. Many of them, as I spoke earlier, had helping angels, angels who were friends from synagogue, and others, neighbors who had lived next to them for years and years. But now, since everybody was home all the time, proximity was a blessing. Judaism is the only religion I know of where holiness is not found alone on a mountaintop, but in the presence of other people. The whole idea that when we say Kaddish, the time when we feel most alone and most estranged, because literally the person who made our world complete, our spouse, our parent, a sibling, a friend, God forbid, a child, when they are gone, in that moment of crisis, we want to curl up in a ball, shut out the lights, the blinds, the doors, the world. And Judaism says, no, you need to go find a minyan. You need to find a community. You need to have people over to your house for Shiva, because God is found between us. My teacher, Rabbi Harold Schulweis of blessed memory, captured this in a poem that has stayed with me and in my files forever. The poem begins, "Where? God is not in me, nor in you, but between us. God is not me or mine, nor you or yours, but ours. God is not known, not alone, but in relationship. Not as a separate lonely power, but revealed through our kinship, our friendship, through our healing and binding and raising up of each other. To know God is to know others. To love God is to love others. To hear God is to hear others. More than meditations within, more than insights within, more than feelings within. Between us are claims, obligations, commandments, to act, to do, to behave our beliefs. I seek God not as if he were a person alone, he or she, a process, a power, a being, a thing. I seek God not as if I were alone, a thinker, a mediator, a discrete entity. I seek God in connection, in the nexus of community. I pray and celebrate the betweenness that binds and holds together. Even alone, I am sustained by my memory of betweenness. I love that last line. I love the whole thing. Even alone, I am sustained by my memory of betweenness. Passover, Pesach, is a time of memory and remembering. Things and events that happened to generations we know only through story and folklore, but whose experience is as relevant to us today as it was to them in their time. Tonight, this week, we remember the world as it once was. We remember our betweenness, gathering at synagogue, sharing a row together in the sanctuary, hugs and handshakes, standing around the table, sampling oneg cookies, tearing challah. We remember visits to each other's homes and going out to lunch together, taking walks and just sitting with children and grandchildren on the living room sofa, complaining about what seems now to be such trivial things. The memory of those moments, the certainty, like that of the ancient Israelites, that redemption will come, that we will share them again. It is our greatest strength as a Jewish people and as human beings. Yes, it takes a village to raise a child, and that's a wonderful thing. But the more wonderful thing, the most wonderful thing, the most powerful thing, the most enduring thing is the village itself. We are the village. And no, I'm not going to call us the village people. And together, we are getting through this. That which is between us, that which binds us and obligates us to each other. That is holy. That is the place and the face of God. Shabbat Shalom.
Yasher koach. Very beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Our service is going to continue on page 586, and we'll rise for Elaine.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומשה וקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפסולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום, והשבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא אלוהים, בשמיים ממעל, והארץ מתחת אין עוד. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
You can be seated. A reading before the mourner's Kaddish. When cherished ties are broken and the chain of love is shattered, only trust and the strength of faith can lighten the heaviness of the heart. At times, the pain of separation seems more than we can bear. But if we dwell too long on our loss, we embitter our hearts and harm ourselves and those about us. The psalmist said that this is his affliction. He learned the law of God, and in truth, grief is a great teacher when it sends us back to serve and bless the living. We learn how to counsel and console and comfort those who, like ourselves, are bowed with sorrow. We learn when to keep silent in their presence and when a word will assure them of our love and concern. Thus, even when they are gone, the departed are with us, moving us to live as in their higher moments they themselves wish to live. We remember them now. They live in our hearts. They are an abiding blessing. On this Shabbat, we recall those who died during this past week, these past 30 days, whose families are in the midst of Shiva and Shloshim. As I read the name of your loved one, I invite you, even though you might be standing, God forbid, alone in your home, to rise and stand in their memory. Lyle Daniel Bruder, Barbie Burko, Louise Feldman, Alvin Pinsky, and those for whom the Yortzeit, the anniversary of the death of your loved one, is on this Shabbat. I invite you to rise as I read their name as well. And if you have a name that you would like to be read for Yortzeit, you can also type that into the chat window below the video screen, the comment window, and I'll try to read it as well. Rosalind Ederim, Paula Cohen, Trudy Dvorkin, Morris Flom, Helen Gasso, Alan Glanz, Saul Golden, Bess Columbia, Hirsch Hansen, Marcus Hotz, Jack Jaffe, Vera Johnson, Harry Karp, Larry Katz, Molly Cribble, Margit Lasso, Dr. Jack Letterman, Fannie Lewis, Sarah Malamed, Alvin Narod, Nancy Prinsmetal, Betty June Remick, Lillian Robbins, Nick Rossmo, Toby Rothstein, Phyllis Rudnick, Shalom Saraf, Conrad Sheffrin, Sam Stabsky, David Bernard Silver, Larry Sprackman, Sarah Stern, Bernardo Tesler, Lillian Weinstein, Vera Woolner, and Richard Wong. If there are others who have names to say for Kaddish, I invite you again to call them out loud, to type them into our comment window, to think of them for blessing. We add to all of those names the names of all those who died in defense of freedom and justice, victims of terror in this land, the land of Israel, and around the world. And those who died in the Shoah and the Holocaust that have no family left to remember them, we recall them for blessing as well. The Mortar's Kaddish, if you do have a Siddur in front of you, is on page 598. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, v'yomad yivrach yerutei v'yamlich malchuteh. B'chayechon v'yomechon u'chayei l'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'yimaru, amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lomei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitroman v'yitnaseh. V'yit adar v'yit aleh v'yit alal shemei kudesha b'richu. Le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata, daminon v'alma v'maru, amen. Yehei shlomo rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'yakol Yisrael v'maru, amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, u'ya'asei shalom, aleinu v'yakol Yisrael, v'kol yoshvei tevel v'maru, amen. May the source of peace and peace to all who mourn comfort the bereaved among us, and we say together, amen. That concludes our service for the evening. A reminder that there is Torah study tomorrow morning at 8:30, and our Shabbat morning service will begin at 10. Join us on Sunday morning at 10 a.m. for our first day of Pesach holiday service, festival service, and join us Sunday night for our second night Seder. Just sign up online to be given the Zoom link. Dr. Taussig, it's a pleasure to be with you. Are you all set for Seder on the island? Do they sell matzah on the island?
Actually, yes, and I want to make a point of supporting the local Save-On that brought it in. So, yeah.
Terrific.
Once I'm quite all set. It's not Vancouver, that's for sure, but it'll be fun.
Well, I can tell you Vancouver's not Los Angeles either. So
And that's true. So I'm really not.
what I paid for a jar of gefilte fish could have fed a small family. But what are you gonna do? It's a Seder. And it's important to support our local kosher butchers and markets and restaurants. And we get Breakstone's butter at Pesach, and Epi brings it in for Pesach. So we really like Breakstone's butter. So we buy like, I don't know, 4 salted, 4 regular, and put them in the freezer all year. So.
Never even heard of it. So
it's a whipped butter from New York. It's the best. And if you
I'm on it.
Actually won't break the matzah, so it's kind of tricky, but it's good stuff.
Okay.
Good butter too. Anyhow, now I'm getting hungry. Let's sing a closing song.
Indeed. Ose shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru amen. Ose shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru amen.
Shabbat shalom.